Hello and welcome to another episode of How To with Mr. Adams. Today, closer than you are probably comfortable with. No, I can't get that close. All right, right there. What we're talking about today on How To is equality versus fairness and equity. We're also going to talk about the principles of democracy. So first of all, yesterday we spoke about fairness and equity versus equality. If you remember the pizzas that we talked about yesterday, there was the equality pizza, which will be right here. Remember, everyone gets the same size of slice of pizza. That is the equality pizza. That is equality. Everyone gets the same thing. We also spoke about fairness and equity, and here's the fairness and equity pizza right here. The fairness and equity pizza says that everyone gets what they need. If you remember, my example was my 5-year-old always wants to have the same amount of food as me, but I weigh 5 times as much. How is that fair that we should eat the exact same? It'd be equal if we ate the same amount, but it's not equal if it's not fair if I'm a lot bigger and I need more food. So that was the difference between fairness and equity. So please remember that. So today, what we're going to move on to is looking at the 4 principles of democracy. What you need to do, and I'll give you a second to do this, please turn to page 27, and we're going to just read over the information about fairness and equity. So do that right now. I'll give you a moment. You almost there? You're there now? Okay, good. All right, let's start. If you're not there yet, just pause it. You have the magic pause button. You can just come back to the video as soon as you get to that page. So listen and follow along in your textbook. You should be following along in your textbook right now, please. Introducing the 4 principles of democracy, choices and consequences is the heading on page 27. Mr. Grundy's class had been reading and discussing the equality pizza and fairness and equity pizza. Toba put up his hand. Mr. Grundy, he said with a huge grin, it's like totally unfair to talk about pizza before lunchtime. Mr. Grundy nodded. I thought about that, he said. And we are ordering pizza as a sharing snack for next Friday. The class cheered. I don't know if I'll ever order you guys pizza, sorry. Maybe one day. Mr. Grundy smiled. I'm ordering 4 pizzas. We'll have an anchovy and olive pizza, a jalapeno and pepperoni special, then a red onion, spinach, and feta combo, and his voice trailed off as he looked at the class. They were looking at him in dismay and disbelief. Emily shot her hand up. You're joking, right, Mr. G? He grinned and said, well, yes and no. Yes, we'll be sharing pizza next Friday. But no, I won't be making choices for the class. Since we're learning about democracy, let's put it into practice. A democratic system is one in which students or citizens have a voice in decision-making. So to be democratic, all 23 of us should have a say in the decisions we make. Let's talk a little bit more about it. Mr. Grundy went to the whiteboard and continued. There are 4 main principles that we have to think about when we talk about democracy. We've already discussed equity earlier today. Another principle involves our freedoms. In democracy, one of our freedoms is to make choices. Just to review, we've already talked about 2 of the fundamental principles of democracy: freedoms and equity. Ivan was waving his hand. Mr. Grundy, what happens if people make bad choices? Mr. Grundy laughed. You mean anchovy and olive choices? That would have some interesting consequences. Choices have consequences. And consequences involve another principle of democracy: justice. Justice means we have a system to make sure that everyone is treated fairly. If I make a decision that's not fair, there will be consequences. How many of you thought that it wasn't fair that just one person out of 24, hey, just to think about it, there's 23 students in our class, but not in the grade 6 class. Anyways, one person out of 24 should be making a group decision without input from the other 23, right? I'm the one You're the 23, so 24. The students and their teacher all raised their hands. Do you think there would have been consequences if I'd ordered those pizzas? Everyone nodded in agreement. Mr. Grundy continued. To actually order those pizzas, we could choose another principle of democracy, the right to have representation. Here in class, we could vote for representatives. They'd find out what everybody wants in the way of pizza, and then work out our class order. Mr. Grundy walked over to the board. Let's sum up what we've been discussing. Here are the principles of democracy we've been talking about. Democracy equals freedoms, representation, equity, and justice. You'll be hearing much more about these 4 principles of democracy in the months to come. But right now, I can only hear stomachs growling. So lunchtime, class dismissed. If only I were so cool as Mr. Grundy. All right, that's all we're going to talk about in our video about fairness, equity, and freedom and the democracy's principles of democracy. So what I want you to do is when you are done, look at the assignment number 1, I believe is what it's called, and continue working on that. There's some questions it's going to ask you related to this chapter. Good luck and have fun.